Hello, and welcome to another episode of Hi, I'm Jason with Jason Pollock. I am not Jason. Join Jason and Justin back in the green room as they talk with some of their favorite folks from the entertainment industry. And now, the man you haven't been waiting for, Jason Pollock.
Hello, everybody, and thanks for tuning in to this episode of Hi, I'm Jason, and this is my co-host, Melissa Marino.
Hi.
And our guest today is a legend to me. I'm a big horror nut, and I got to tell you, one of the first movies I ever saw was The Blob, and it traumatized me for the rest of my life. I've been afraid of beanbag chairs and jelly. And right now, my guest is very special to me. He's the son of the creator of The Blob, Irvin Yeaworth Jr. Please give a nice welcome to Kris Yeaworth.
Thank you,
Hey,
Jason.
Kris.
Good to be here.
Thank you for joining us. Thanks for taking the time out of your schedule.
It's my pleasure. I'm just sitting around here waiting for the ice storm to start.
Oh, you're on the East Coast with me.
I am. Yes, just 35 miles northwest of Philadelphia.
Ooh. Where The Blob was filmed, in Phoenixville.
Correct. I live, as the crow flies, about 7 miles from where our studios were.
So it's part of your history now. You're just a permanent part of Phoenixville.
Yes, well, Phoenixville was the closest town. When we moved into Chester Springs, bought our complex, which used to be the summer school for the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts, the oldest arts institution in Pennsylvania, in the country, which is still in existence in Broad and Cherry in Philadelphia. But there was their summer campus, had 165 acres, 26 buildings. We made 3 of their sculpting and painting studios into sound stages. And then, of course, we had multiple buildings and fields and a 90-foot swimming pool and whatnot. And part of my job as a kid was to maintain I used to mow about 10 acres of grass a week, in addition to going to a 2-room schoolhouse and working in the film industry. So
you were busy.
I sort of experienced it all.
Oh, my God. How old were you when your father made The Blob?
I was 9. I turned 10 during post-production. And Steve McQueen lived in the basement of our house in 1957 when we were shooting The Blob, and would come upstairs and knew that my mother had a cookie jar on top of the refrigerator with chocolate chip cookies, and he was just nuts about Toll House cookies. So he would always come in and pilfer the cookie jar. And then there were times when we wouldn't have any, and he would just plead with my mother and my sister, somebody to bake him some chocolate chip cookies. And my mother went for a ride with him down to Hallman's General Store, which was sort of the local shopping center, the only place still in Chester Springs that you can buy anything. There are no fast food restaurants, no sidewalks, still to this day, no traffic lights. No street lights.
It's still standing? The general store is still there?
Yes, where Steve McQueen used to run down and cash his paychecks. Harold would cash it for him, and he oft times would flip me a quarter. He said, "Hey, Kris, go down to Hallman's, give me a pack of Pall Malls, will you?" Imagine a 9-year-old kid walking in and buying cigarettes these days. But Harold Hallman knew who I was and knew I didn't smoke Pall Malls. I was a Lucky's guy. No, anyhow. He would sell them to me, and when I told him it was for Steve McQueen, he knew what was going on, because he was also it was on their field where I played Little League baseball and whatnot. So I was certainly well known in the community, as were all of us. But I'm not
So
sure where I ripped off to, but you guide me back to where you want me to go.
No. So you were 9 or 10 years old when The Blob was being filmed. Did you spend a lot of time on set?
Yes, and after hours, so we knew Steve McQueen from the year before. We made a feature-length 16mm film for the Salvation Army called Desperate Measures. And Mitzi McWarmer, who ended up later on marrying Wayne Rogers, was Steve McQueen's girlfriend at the time. And so he drove down from New York in 1956 to see what was going on at this film studio in Pennsylvania. And so we knew who he was from before. And also knew he was too old to play at 26. He was 26 in 1956. So he was 27 in 1957 when he played the teenage.
Nobody really looked like high school students in that movie.
No,
that was some of the first thing that came to mind when I first saw it. I was like, wait a minute, are these high school kids?
Well, my dad was my dad was 4 years older. My dad was born in 1926, so in February on Valentine's Day, he was a real sweetheart. But Steve was 27, my dad was 31, and my dad looked younger than Steve McQueen, by the way. I have some pictures on the set where you can actually see it, and also I have some of the only outtakes that ever happened for The Blob. Paramount destroyed them all, but one of the guys who was the grip and the slate boy in all the shots asked one of the editors if they could send him some trims from the heads of takes, which he went and had transferred. And so the only footage that's not in the film that still exists was all done from a 16mm transfer. And there's actually some live footage. There's like 5 seconds of my father actually having a conversation with somebody, and you can see how young he is. So anyhow, there's
oh, wow,
unusual footage around, and I've had access to it because we bought the place and started making the first film, which was called Twice Convicted. It was in 1952. We were moving out of West Philadelphia. I was 4 at the time. I just recovered from being hit by a car and getting a fractured skull. The only bone in my body I ever broke is my cranium. Only broken bone I've ever had.
It sounds like you still got your head together, though, now.
Well, yes, but, my IQ is, like, just above room temperature now. I just got a little brain matter. But anyhow, so we started working. That film was bought by somebody else, and it was spliced into some other really teenage exploitation stuff and released as The Flaming Teenage. It was an hour-long film, and they added some junk at the beginning and whatnot to talk about the horrors of teenagers and drinking and other stuff. And so, but that was how I started as a 4-year-old coming out there, and I used to even hand process 16mm film and work as every job that there was in motion picture production. I worked from sound to lighting to gaffer to grip to set building to cameraman, producer, director, editor in film, video, everything else. I did it all because I had to.
I would have loved every minute of that.
Well, and a lot of times I would go
because you grew up. Sorry.
Well, I mean, it was, if my dad ran a grocery store, I would know about how to stock shelves and promote end caps and whatnot and do all that because my father was in television, radio, film, and live recording for records and whatnot. He used to say we're radioactive and television too. And of course, back in those days, he used to we used to joke and call ourselves the pitch blenders, because that's what they used to make heavy water for nuclear radioactive stuff. And nobody understands that stuff. Most of the information I know
you grew up near
already,
so
well, disappeared into the black hole of the collective consciousness of the generation.
Well, that was
So
pretty heavy.
anyhow, yeah, I've been doing this all my life, and while we were in post production for the Blob in 1957, we made our first records. My siblings and I, we were called the Little People, for Epic Records, called Gentle Shepherd, and then we went on to become the Kindergarten Kids for Columbia Records, for the children's club record club they did, and we were the Jack and Jill Little People. We recorded, if you subscribe to Jack and Jill magazine, you got a stereo EP of us singing various and sundry songs like Hike, 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 we go hiking. Or Amos the Famous Mosquito.
I've heard of Jack and Jill Yeah. I don't know the song, but I've heard of Jack and Jill magazine.
Well, it was a biggie, and then Junior Scholastic, and then there was a Weekly Reader also. And later on in life, there was a Showtime by Weekly Reader that I sang the theme song for on Weekly. We're bringing the wonder of the world to you because we believe kids deserve the news. KIDS TV. You can still find that somewhere on YouTube or Google it somewhere. But I sing the theme song for that. So I've been involved in kids stuff until my third year of college, when I would take the Eastern shuttle from Boston to New York, and I would show up and say, "Yes, I'm here for the Little People session." And I go, "What?" It's all little kids.
And
I could hit the notes, but it sounded more like Frankie Valli than I did like a little kid anymore.
And you're still singing today, aren't you?
I am. I had a gig on last Friday, and got several more lined up. I prefer singing now to people. I don't sing in clubs or the occasional coffee house now, but mostly in private house parties or senior centers where people really want to listen to the music. I've logged too many hours. I have a repertoire of well over 5,000 songs, and I don't have time to sing for people who are interested in collecting digits or having their own conversation. If they don't want to, that's fine. I just don't want to be there if you don't want to listen to what I'm saying. That's all. Because I've got mine.
Yeah.
I've got things to say that might make a difference in where you are today. I might lift your spirit. I might make you reflect.
That
on
one
something.
person.
And it happens all the time. I can't tell you the amount of times. About a third of the time I play in the memory care for people who have Alzheimer's and whatnot. And so many times I've had a son or a daughter in their 50s come up to me with tears streaming down their face and say, "I can't thank you enough for what you did today. That's the first time I've heard my mother's voice in the last 4 months."
And that's why you do it. That's what makes it worth it.
Absolutely. Not to mention that I do it if there was nobody there but the squirrels, because I was born to carry a tune. I enjoy singing.
That's wonderful.
That's a really good reason to do it, because you enjoy doing what you do.
Yep. I think so. I think it's the best motivation. It's not about
that
the
what
Benjamin.
Inspired you to? Well, no, you got to do it because you love it, and the Benjamins will come.
Well, they do or they don't. Usually they don't, but I've had enough to get by. I'm not complaining. I'm still in the upper 1% of the world.
That's true.
People forget how big India is and how bad poverty is there. There's 500 million people there. So I don't know.
We're all doing
okay
United comparatively.
States. Yeah, we're all wealthy compared to the rest of the world.
It's very true. Now,
Good way to look at it.
On a different note, speaking of music, what was it that inspired you to write the Burl Live show?
Well, people have been telling me since I was a teenager that my voice reminded them of Burl Ives. I never saw it, but I heard it from so many different people, from people who never heard of Burl Ives.
I got one of your CDs.
Okay. My mother says it, used to say it. And of course, other people say it. I used to sing jingles all the time too, and I sang one for a New Yorker brand deli cheese, and the account exec came in from Chicago, and she was sitting there listening to it, and while I was singing, she said, "You remind me of that folk singer fellow from Chicago, Burl Ives." So I've been told that often enough, so I decided, oh, what the heck, I might as well do it. So I wrote along with a good friend of mine, Randy Frang, we wrote that. We also did a parody of Groundhog Day songs. It has a limited shelf life because Groundhog Day is a pretty short season.
Yeah,
we did a bunch of parodies. Chevy Noah. Chevy Noah, you swerved. It's about hitting the groundhog. It's not for the faint of heart. Peter wouldn't like it because it's basically the farmer against the groundhog is eating his crops and whatnot. And there was a booklet with drawings and poetry and everything. We did a takeoff on Yeaworth and Sullivan's "I Am the Very Thing of a
Modern Major General."
Yes, a Modern Major General was all about groundhogs. Yes. So
that's excellent.
Yeah. But Burl Ives, I always enjoyed Burl Ives. I grew up with Americana. I grew up with Wayfarer and Stranger.
Oh,
which is actually the name of his radio broadcast. And I close every show with that, except I call it Wayfarer and Pilgrim as opposed to Stranger, because I figure we're all sort of strangers, but we're sort of like all moving through this world, together, even though we're alone, and we try to find, shelter or a kindred spirit wherever we can. And so that's why I close every show with Wayfarer and Pilgrim. And not to mention that I'm just going over Jordan. My father was killed in Jordan while we were in 2014. We were working on the biggest project of anybody's lives that we'd worked. It was a $13 million project in Aqaba in Jordan. It had the first. It was a boutique theme park, and it had the first motion base in the Middle East. We seat 120 people, and it was built in Poland by a subsidiary of the Walt Disney Company, because you know how they do those motion-based things at Disney World and Disneyland. But this was 2003 and 2004 we were having this built. But and it was the largest motion base in the world at that time, and the first in the Middle East. And I did it in 12.1 surround sound. I had 7.1 on the. I was a sound designer in addition to the film editor, and so everything you saw and heard, I edited or created. And we had live earthquakes in the room and rumbling rocket ship blasts off with CO2 and starscape, and it's what you go to see. A multi-
So it was like an interactive movie.
Well, it wasn't interactive. We made the audience move. So. It was a 50-foot screen, and because we controlled the theater, we were able to seat the audience in the sweet spot where you can't, with real surround sound. There's only half a dozen perfect seats in the theater. But it's because they have to put the speakers so close to the side of the audience. We had our speakers 15 to 18 feet away from the audience, so there were more sweet spots. But, with the motion base, we make them, when they're flying over and we're flying through a valley at Petra or someplace else, like at the end of Indiana Jones when they fly up, when they go into the temple.
Yeah.
That's Petra in Jordan, and that's where we were shooting this stuff. It was all about Jordan. But when the helicopter banked, so did the audience, and the motion base banked them as well. And we moved them up and down and rumbled them and did whatever during the rocket ship blast off. And so we just had that. And in addition to the 7.1, I had 5 channels in the ceiling. So I could rotate the sound, horizontally, vertically, front to back, side. I could do things. But if you're flying through and a valley with sheep and there's rock falling down and whatnot, I could make the sound of the rock fall from the ceiling down to the floor. So it was the zenith of our creative experience, and we had a project. We were starting pre-production in Dubai when we finished this up. Unfortunately, 6 weeks before the final opening, my father was killed in a horrific car crash.
So sorry to hear that.
Going from Petra to Amman, going from Aqaba to Amman on the desert highway. So, after my father got done doing films for many years, he decided to go into. He's always been a World's Fair junkie. He's been to every World's Fair since 1936. Everyone in the world. He'd been to everyone, and we did projects for 3 of them: Knoxville in '82, New Orleans in '84, and the 500th anniversary of Columbus in 1992 in Seville.
What were the projects for the World's Fair?
Well, the one in Knoxville, which is the first one, of course, this was when I had to learn stuff that I never really wanted to learn. I had to learn about the electronics and momentary contact switches and MIDI time code, and this is 1981 into early '82. And there were no PCs, there were no IBMs. There was the Eagle computer, which was an outgrowth of the slideshow industry, where they kept adding more and more slideshow and dissolves with ravens and doves and all these other controls. So I had to learn how to do this, and we had 3 rooms working simultaneously in surround sound, along with individual room in the sound in the World's Fair. It was called The Power, and it was 3 6-minute presentations from one room to the other. And of course, in that one, we had a rocket ship blast off in an infinity room. We had the rights to absolutely turn off even the exit sign, because we with a dead man switch, so that if something happened, the lights could come back on. I did my first surround sound thing in 1975, and I had to invent ways to do things. And
when did surround sound come out? Because I thought surround sound came out in like the late '80s, early '90s.
It is, but this was 1974 and 5.
You were so ahead of your time.
Yeah, because my dad was a visionary. My dad was always. He invented networking before there was networking. He put people together all over the world, and still to this day, I hear from people all over the world that he's networked with and for and done things to, and people are still, flabbergasted at some of these things that we were doing by the seat of our pants. Every day when we mixed the Lancaster experience, matter of fact, they showed us the absolute first test. We were doing the mix of Todd A.O., which was Mike Todd, Elizabeth Hale is the true love of her life, who got killed. But they had 6 Academy Awards out front there for South Pacific and Sound of Music and Paint Your Wag and other stuff. And I came in there and I said, no, I need the sound to go 360 degrees, plus I need to go left rear to right front. He said, well, we can't do that. I said, well, I've been doing it in Nashville for 2 years with joysticks. Don't you have any joysticks? He said, no, we only have a 270-degree pan pipe. You can go from left rear to left front to right right front to right rear, but you were stuck. You had to go through the other. I said, no, you need joysticks. So they had to rent out some outboard gear, and while we were doing the stuff, I came in after we'd been doing some pre-mixing and doing some further film editing, and I saw a ping pong table. This was in Studio A at Todd AO, which has a 50-foot screen, a 70-foot long mixing console, 3 engineers on chairs that slide back and forth, hooked up to 119 film dubbers, many of which were stereo, some of which were even 4-track. Enoch Light and the Light Brigade, and if you go back, if you're an audiophile, you look at that stuff. He was recording his records on 35 millimeter film instead of on reel-to-reel Ampex stuff, because 35 millimeter at 90 feet a minute is actually traveling at 18 frames. 18 inches per second, as opposed to 15, which was the fastest that quarter-inch tape or any tape would go at that time. So these people were experts in audio, and they had to learn a few things from this guy who went to a 2-room schoolhouse for 6 years. 3 grades upstairs and 3 grades downstairs, and with a single teacher for each of the 3 grades. So
that's pretty impressive.
I came in and I saw this ping pong table sitting there, and I walked up to it and I saw stems and seeds. And I went, huh? I turned and looked at the engineer, because these guys are all pocket protector people. There was no way that they were smoking dope and leaving stems and seeds on a ping pong. I said, what's going on with this? And he said, oh, I meant to tell you, Led Zeppelin was in here. They're people. They're doing this. Their movie now. I didn't know what it was called, but it was the song remains the same. And they came in and they saw your gear and set up, and they said, what's this? And I showed them what you were doing. I said, we want that. So Led Zeppelin and their production team took a page out of this Old Country Boys book and incorporated my techniques. And, people have always helped me, so I'm always happy to have people. I don't have any proprietary information. I ask questions and people would help me, and so I'm always happy to do the same. So anyhow, that's my Led Zeppelin story. Like it kicked to another time where Keith Richards and Anita von Pallenberg kicked their heroin addiction in my parents' house. But that wasn't until 1977. So it was after we'd sold the film studios and moved on to the next place where we were getting into worldwide communications and World's Fair programs and whatnot.
Your dad was
That's another story for another day.
I got to ask you real quick, what became of the Jordan experience?
Well, it ran there for multiple years, and then they didn't maintain it properly. The building is still there. It's called the Gateway, the Aqaba Gateway. The King Abdullah, the whole family went to see it. The 37 members of the royal family went to see it. We had a timeline. We had all kinds of pre-shows. We set them through a flash flood and a sunrise and a sunset in the pre-show. Forced perspective on a campfire with a little Toyota truck at Wadi Rum, the 7 Pillars of Wisdom. For those of you who've read your Lawrence. I just love Jordan. I love working in the Middle East. I love working in Israel. I love working in Jordan. I even wandered into Saudi Arabia one time by mistake and got called back by the guard trucks. So, but yeah, I spent a lot of time there. I've been to Jordan 8 or 9 times, Israel 3 times. It's just it's a fascinating part of the world. It's where history began.
So archaic. Yeah, I remember swimming in the Dead Sea, and I got yelled at because I was going too far, and they said you can't go to Jordan, and I didn't even occur to me that I could, but they said you'd go to the border. You don't have a passport in the water.
Yep. Well, and I bathed in the Red Sea on both sides, and of course. Nice. There's some of the best salts that you'll get anywhere. I mean, it doesn't matter whether you buy it from Israel or the Jordan side. honest to goodness, Dead Sea bath salts will. Well, I remember one time we were on the Israeli side. We went in. Of course, you don't want to get a drop of that water in your eye, and you have to put your feet down in order to, to move from your. You can't roll over from your stomach to your back. You have to put your feet down in order to roll over. But you could definitely read it with a book. But the guide, my father took 70 people one year. And we went to both countries, but we were we went into the Dead Sea from the Israeli side, and this the tour guide said, now that you've all been in the Dead Sea, I want you to realize now that you'll all be asleep within a half an hour because those salts will get into your body, and you're going to feel completely relaxed from your hemorrhoids to your tonsils. And he was right. It gets into the skin and it's really relaxing.
I remember it got into my skin because I shaved beforehand, so that was a little burny.
Oh yes, that's yeah. But as you may or may not know, it's losing its. The Jordan River goes in there and never comes out. My father was part of a project called the Dead Red Project. They were going to pump water in from the Red Sea to help raise the level of the Dead Sea. And he was part of that. It was an intergovernmental thing that just never got quite pulled off, but they worked on that for multiple years. So my father was deeply, deeply involved. When he died in Jordan, we had it at the baptismal site where Jesus was baptized, which is not in Israel, it's in Jordan, as the Bible says, it's Bethany beyond the Jordan. And so he had helped develop it when it had been mines had been left in there and barbed wire, and they cleaned all that up. And when you're up there, you can see from Jordan, you can see right over, you can see right across the lights of Jerusalem, which is really a magnificent sight to see at sunset. But
that's great.
There were the richest people. There were 13 ministers from the Jordanian cabinet were there, including several former prime ministers, the wealthiest and most connected, and then half the people were there, the people nobody ever knew. They were just the people that we knew when we worked with, because my dad was always a firm believer that it's better to get to know the janitor with the keys than it is the CEO, because the CEO doesn't know how things work. The janitor does. So not only do you get to know how the regular folk live and eat and get invited to their houses and whatnot and have some wonderful meals and wonderful fellowship, but they can get you access that the CEO can't get. So we knew those people, and the Jordanian, the U.S. consul, they came up to me and apologized. I don't know how many times. They said, "We're sorry. We had no idea who your father was." Well, that's because he always flew under the radar. He just went and did what he did. And
he sounds like an amazing human being. He really does.
Somebody write something about that. If I had time, I would. But I do have hours and hours and hours and hours of footage and interview with both my mother, a few things with my dad, plus all the other people who were around when we started the company, Good News Productions, Valley Forge Films in 1952. We were there in Chester Springs from 52 to 74. And I had moved to Nashville in 73, where I became a session singer down there. My first gig in Nashville was backing up Roy Rogers and Dale Evans on 12 songs.
No way. Wow,
yeah,
great.
And at scale too, and because it was an AFTRA job, and I was a member of AFTRA, they paid double. If we had to double track it, we got paid double. So I made like $600 and some for the day, which was pretty killer money,
Wow,
for a 7-hour day in 1973.
No doubt.
But I haven't made money that good since.
Well, this podcast will make your career explode all over again.
Well,
hey,
Here's hoping you have a good podcast, Jason. By the way, I've always enjoyed the times that we spend together at the Colonial Theater. And your wife.
You're always
what a
so
sweet
friendly.
lady.
Thank you so much for that. She adores you and your wife, all the same. And you have the same thing that I did. We both married up.
Exactly.
Speaking of women, your dad. I gotta bring this up. Your dad introduced you to Patty Duke, didn't he?
Well, not. I mean, he signed her to, or he and Jack signed her to play the part, but no, he didn't introduce her. I introduced myself. She showed up with her manager, John Ross, and was walking down from one end of the property to the other because we had a whole main drag that called Art School Road. It was left over from when the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts moved there. They named the main drag all the way through Chester Springs. They named it Art School Road. So that's where we lived, and I was riding my bicycle and from the office down, heading east about a quarter of a mile to where the big studio was, which is where all the media rights, the police station, the doctor's office, the old man's cabin, we had the cops there at the end for the shootout at the diner. All the close-ups were all filmed in that studio, but we had torn that apart, and it was a doctor's office for the 4D man, and also the police station was still in there. And Patty Duke was walking down there with my sister and with John Ross, my older sister, Kathy. And there, John Ross was telling some silly story, joke about a dog how they had to starve him in order to, and he still wouldn't eat the right dog food. He didn't pick Alpo; he picked the other one every time for whatever reason. But anyhow, I just sort of like I introduced because my sister was there, and I said, "Hi, I'm Kris. I'm Kathy's brother." And so we just sort of gravitated towards one another. She thought I was cute. I thought she was cute. And I had a day off that day. I didn't have to work on the sets or anything. And we started walking around. And first it was the three of us. And then Patty and I would find an excuse to ditch my sister. And then we would go make out by the waterfalls. Or some of the other the wisteria arbors and whatnot. This place was great for if you're a romantic lad, and I've loved women since before I knew what they were. And I was a blue-eyed blonde, cute kid with a good personality and ability to sing. I knew I could sing. I think 100 songs by the time I was 2. Or 3 for sure. My brother
that
John.
Skull fracture did nothing.
Say again?
That skull fracture didn't affect you at all. In fact, it expanded your mind.
Sounds like it made him more of a ladies' man.
Yeah, well, maybe it did, but I always, and of course, my grandmother was on my father's side. We've been here since before the American Revolution. In fact, my father's generation was the 8th generation in a row of ministers in the family, going back to the American Revolution. And my great grandfather, Irvin C. Yeakel, our name used to be Yeakel, and my grandfather changed it in 1918 to Yeaworth. And that's a long story, but there's a lot of anti-Germanic sentiment after World War I. And my great grandfather never liked the name Yeaworth, so he wanted to change it. And after he died, they decided they would keep Ye, and then my grandfather had been studying Wordsworth, and he liked the Worth part, so we became Yeaworth, and everybody liked it. So my grandfather invented the name Yeaworth. We were the only ones. I think some people have picked up the name or something over the years, but We are the only Yeaworth, and I'm actually Irvin Shortus Yeaworth III, which is why they nicknamed me Kris with a K. They were going to nickname me Tertius, which is Latin for the third. And boy, would that have been a boy named Sue childhood for me. So the saner heads prevailed, and they named me after my father's favorite Norwegian uncle, Uncle Kris. And Kris with a K is the way, although in 1947, nobody had ever heard of it in the U.S. But Kris Kristofferson came out, and then all of a sudden, Kris with a K became trendy.
You had relevance.
And he had it before I did, but nobody knew. Anyhow, I'm not sure where I was, but tell me, Patty Duke.
Well, you know.
Yes. That was.
So she taught you how to French kiss.
Well, yes, and I lived in the country. I saw chickens lay eggs. I saw, cows getting pregnant. I saw the whole thing. I knew I don't know nothing about birthing babies. I wasn't like that. I mean, I didn't know how to do it, but I knew how it was done. I had no idea because I had kissed every girl in first, second, third, fourth grade by the time I was in third grade. Wow. So I was very familiar with kissing, but I had no idea what the French were doing with their tongues. And Patty Duke showed me. So I still have my dear Kris letter when she broke up with me. And the picture sent back to me, and Howie Fishlove, who was the guy who was a slate boy, gave me his father owned a big novelty company in Chicago, one of the biggest one with chattering teeth and magnetic black and white Scottish terriers with magnets on the base, and those X-ray eyeglasses, all those types of things. And he brought a suitcase of them, and he gave me one, and I gave Patty one of the black and white Scottish terriers on a thing, and she sent him back to me. I'm sorry the chain broke, and she sent. I think her manager made her do it. Of course, who knew until years later that she was being sexually abused by her manager and his wife. And
that's terrible.
Oh, it's in her autobiography. They call me Anna.
Okay.
Which was written by Gloria Hockman, who was married to Stan Hockman, my all-time favorite Philadelphia sports writer. Actually, in that book, she mentions me and my sister by reference. She doesn't mention us by name, but she talks about going to Pennsylvania to make a science fiction film with a wonderful children of the producer or something. That's all she says about, but she mentioned it.
She referenced you, the 4D man,
absolutely. Right? Yeah, the 4D man. Yeah.
Oh,
so
Melissa
go ahead.
Sorry, Melissa, my co-host here, watched The Blob for the first time yesterday, and she has a question for you.
Okay. It's not so much a question; it's how distracted I was by the fact that the dog kept me distracted through the whole movie, because all I kept saying to my husband was, why do they keep dropping this dog? Why is nobody going back to save this dog? What is Steve McQueen's problem? He doesn't care about the dog. That was like the whole thing through the whole movie. And we get to the end where they're, at the diner, and I'm going to my husband. I said, what's going on with the dog? He's like, are you paying attention to the plot of the story right now? I said, I am, but I'm trying to figure out, did the dog make it out safe? Like, that was my only concern through the whole movie. I said, I don't care if the blob eats Steve McQueen. I said, I need to know what happens to this dog.
Okay, well, you've got to understand something, all right? First of all, the dog's name in real life was Pepsi.
Oh.
He belonged to Don Taylor, who was a sound intern and sang in my father's choir at the Phoenixville Church. So he came to work for the summer, and they needed a dog. So Pepsi was put in the shot. Now, you know that when the old man hears it, the dog comes with him. And when he comes out, we know the blob does not eat dogs because there was nothing around to eat there, and he left the dog alone.
That's a very
and
good
then
point.
the dog shows up every once in a while through the rest, for a while. Anita Corso takes the dog for a while.
Yeah, yeah. And then when there's the grocery store, he gets away.
Exactly. But the Blob wasn't interested in the dog, so you can ease your mind on that.
Rest assured that he got out of town. I wasn't worried about anybody in the diner, about the little boy. I said, I hope the dog got away. Okay, that was my whole thing.
Well, there you go. The dog got away because the Blob, I don't know whether it was the fur or what, but the Blob had no interest in the dog.
Good. I can sleep sound tonight.
The Blob doesn't eat dogs.
I actually heard something.
But also now you know that the dog's name in real life was Pepsi.
Not William. I think that's what the little boy wanted to name him, was William.
No, William, yeah. I don't like William. Well, you can name him whatever
I don't like William. That was probably my favorite part of the whole movie when the little boy, I don't like William. I said to my husband, but that boy's adorable.
Yeah, well, he my brother David would have played the part, but he just didn't take direction well. He had the right face, the right everything. Matter of fact, every time he was in a movie, I had to dub his lines for him because everybody loved the way he looked, but he refused to. He's the most stubborn one in the family. He hated shrimp. We had shrimp for dinner one night, and he wouldn't swallow, and he kept it in his mouth for a 45-minute car ride because he wouldn't swallow it and wouldn't spit it out. I, on the other hand, would be smart enough to have hawked it into the bushes, as we were going from the house into the car, and nobody would have even known. But he was so stubborn, he just kept it until he made himself vomit out in Newtown Square Junior High School. Anyhow, but that almost killed him when he had appendicitis too. His stoic stubbornness. But anyhow, yes, the Pepsi was the name of the dog. Jason, it's in the. It's a throwaway line in One Night in 57. If you play the song at the end, it says, but Steve McQueen drove into town. He left because there was nothing left to eat. We know he didn't like Pepsi. That's a throwaway line there because that's the dog's name. So that's in the audio, which Fangoria streamed a few years ago along with an article they did on me. They streamed my song One Night in 57. So. But once again, movies are just one of the things that we did. We just, it was always growing up, well, what's next on the thing? Well, and the next year, while we were in production on the 4D Man, we were also making the first regularly scheduled videotape program in America. Walter Annenberg, who owned Channel 6, TV Guide, and the Philadelphia Inquirer back in those days, later became ambassador of the Court of St. James. Owned WFIL, which is where American Bandstand was being broadcast, and so he bought the first Ampex VTR outside of the ones they had in New York and Hollywood. And up to that point, everybody only used them for time shifting because they were much better than kinescopes, and they were you could record it in the East Coast and then play it again for the West Coast later. But my father, once again, being a visionary, said, no, let's do live production on it so then we can make dubs and we can send it out to TV stations. We don't have to wait for anything. So that's what we did. And I think we were on 13 or 14 different stations. And we, with the Little People again, we sang the opening theme song, and I used to row the guests to the island in a rowboat every week. And this was the forerunner of Mr. Rogers. This guy dressed down, played a pump organ, fed his fish, had marionettes, and did education and spoke to the camera as if they were the kid on the other side of the camera. There's absolutely no doubt in my mind that Fred Rogers saw that at some point and helped use it and bless his heart. I'm glad they did it because it was once again, it was a concept. My father would do these things. My dad was doing the Jerry Lewis became famous for him. My dad was doing it also in the 50s before Jerry Lewis. He was doing video assist, so we could shoot film and video at the same time, so we could see what you couldn't see. Only the cameraman could see. And so my dad came up with a lot of those systems. So it was, well, he had a very high IQ, and he, always believed that life was a race against time. And so we'd say, okay, this one, I need you to learn how to do surround sound, or this one, you have to be the boom man, or this one, you have to shoot second camera, or this one, I need you to show back the film while the narrator records it, and all the film would go into a bin, and I'd have to rewind it with all the splices in it so that they could do live syncing. I had to come up with ways to do things without money, and that's unfortunately a lost art. Anybody can do anything if you have unlimited time and unlimited budget. True, but
there's some brilliant filmmakers who could work in a little budget like that. Your father was one of them.
Yeah, they become so innovative.
And
Carrie
to
Gilliam
make it good enough so that people will want to watch it later. I just finished restoration on a 16 millimeter film that he made 60 years ago this year, called The Gospel Blimp, and just finished restoring the Gospel Blimp. It's about people who want to evangelize their neighborhood, but instead of going to talk to their neighbors, they have this grandiose plan about how they're going to get a blimp and fly signs behind it and reach the world that way. And it was the first Christian comedy satire. It was my dad used it's the first Christian comedy that was intended to be one. Because so many Christian films were so poorly made. Even today, so many of them are so poorly made that you cringe when you watch them, because they're just like, come on, you should know better than that. People have been making movies for over 100 years. Come on, can't you do better than that? So,
yeah, just because they're Christian doesn't mean they have to phone in the filmmaking.
Well, exactly. I mean, matter of fact, our attitude has always been, because you're a Christian, that means you ought to do better. Because you have a reason for why you believe what you believe. And if you don't, then you're a fraud. So, this stuff is a truth meter as far as I'm concerned.
You shared some great memories with us, and I want to ask you before we go, if you have one of your favorite takeaways from all your experiences in film with your father, if there's something you didn't share.
Well, they're just so many. I posted on my Facebook page today. My father did, I don't know, well over, I minimized it at half a dozen projects for Billy Graham, including the one that I posted pictures from today on my Facebook page that as a memory. He did the Billy Graham Crusade at Municipal Stadium, which became JFK Stadium, which is where the Army-Navy game was played every year because it seats 110,000 people. And that's where Live Aid was held at JFK before they tore it down.
Yes.
And I shared pictures today. That stadium was full to the gills, and plus the whole infield was filled. Most of the track was filled. There had to have been 125,000 people there. And my dad's in a truck directing stuff, and there's some shots of him with Billy or with Cliff Barrows or with other people. And there's even a shot of me when I was 13, and we're holding up a registration. My dad and I are holding up a registration chip chart for the television cameras. And I'm 13. I could just barely reach high enough to get up there. But there's just there's just so many phenomenal things. Like the time we were shooting a documentary on Jerome Hines, who was the longest serving member of the Metropolitan Opera, was a bass for 41 years, who was actually in Russia during the Cuban Missile Crisis, singing Boris Godunov for Nikita Khrushchev, and all the reporters all surrounded him when he landed in LaGuardia. He said, "What did Khrushchev say?" Because nobody been able to. Jerry Hines had been closer to Khrushchev than anybody during the Cuban Missile Crisis, and then a couple of years, a year and a half later, we were doing a documentary, and we almost got eaten by sharks. Jerry Hines, my dad, and and my brother David and Tom Spaulding, who was a cinematographer on The Blob, and also on the 4D Man. And they're just, man, there's just so many stories in so many places all over the world, including, being in Jordan for a birthday party and trying to order baked potatoes with the language, because they always serve mashed potatoes. And we said, yeah, there's 6 of us coming here at 5 o'clock for dinner, and we want a birthday cake, and we want each one a baked potato. Well, they brought out 5 trays of 6 baked potatoes each. And so, and we laughed ourselves silly. We laughed till we cried. And we did that so many times, so many places all over the world. And so many, we laughed, we cried, mostly we laughed. Because they were just, life is a grand experiment if you just like stick your head up and pay attention, understand your sit rep. If you pay attention to what's in front of you, what's beside you, what's behind you, what's beneath you, what's above you, what's coming from all over. You can avoid a lot of problems of your life if you just will pay attention and not have your face stuck to a screen. There's a pile of dog poop there. All you have to do is, if you're paying attention, you take a step to the left and you miss it. If you're not paying attention, you step in it, and then you ruin the next 15 minutes of your day trying to get that stuff cleaned off your foot. And it's just like simple lessons like that. Learning how not to stand in a doorway. Learning how to walk into a control room where somebody, or an editing room or whatever, and standing in the side away from, and act like you belong there. Volunteer if somebody asks you, grab a broom. Don't expect to start at the top. People, there are just so many smart, small things you can do if you don't have an inflated view of yourself. If you realize that we're all bozos on this bus, and we all need to try and do the best we can to encourage each other. But pay attention to where you are, because, man, whether it's the smallest little microbe or the dew on backlit by the morning sunrise or whatever, there's just wonder and glory everywhere.
We can't even top that. We're going to have to close.
I know, I got to say, I'm going to leave this call with a really good, positive night.
Well, I'm glad.
There's so many little things that could go wrong in life, and it's not even worth dwelling on those little things when there's so many other amazing things around you that you can turn to.
Yes, just say, "No, I'm not going to participate. Thank you. If that's where you're at, good for you. God bless you. I'm going over here with these happy people. I'm going with these people who are looking for joy in life. I'm not over here to deal with people who think they know better than you do how you should behave. Everybody has to walk their own journey. There's a great film, The Oxbow Incident, which my father also had the right to distribute. It's a great morality play with Henry Fonda's in it, Anthony Quinn. It's a great, great morality play. And one of the things is they're hanging these people because they're sure that they stole the cattle, and they were wrong. They're wrong. They hang these people, and they read Henry Fonda reads the letter that what's his name? He's not a famous Western actor. Reads, and all these people are sitting around the bar, in this Western town. And when the sheriffs go, "What are you talking about? You took care of it. We rounded up these rustlers." "No, he's not dead." But before they hang this guy sings a spiritual. You got to walk this lonesome valley. You got to walk it by yourself. Lord, nobody else can walk it for you. You got to walk it by yourself. So you've got to walk this valley. Naked we were born, and naked we're going to return. What are you going to do with a dash between your birth date and your end date? It's what you do in the dashes that matters. And you can't do what you're meant to do if you're complaining and not looking for the positive.
Yeah, you get one life. It's pointless to waste it.
I would say, But people, you and I both know, are doing it every day. They're spending more time binging Netflix. Hey, look, I want to know if Elsa makes it to Montana on Sunday night on the last episode of 1883. You know, I don't know if you're following that, but, you know, I am. You know, I want to know if she got shot by an arrow. Oh, dear. She's got a fever. She's going to make it. They're going to make it, to Kevin Costner's home in Yellowstone. You know, I don't know. But I'm interested in finding out, but I'm not going to binge watch anymore. You know, I don't do that, except unless there may be one or two things I would binge watch, but not much else.
It's funny you say that because I get that all the time. People are like, oh, have you seen this show? I'm like, I don't watch TV that much. I go out and I explore. Like, I'm not home watching all these shows that you guys are talking about. Yeah, I always feel like an outsider. But yeah, I ride horses. Like, I'm the outsider because people will be talking about shows. I'm like, no, I was out in nature, kind of, living my life.
Yeah. Yes, that's just, everything in moderation, including moderation. But yeah, so a little TV is good, but going for a walk and boy, I mean, my galanthus are in bloom. The snowdrops, the first flowers of every spring. They start showing up at the beginning of February, and they'll bloom right through the snow. And then the crocuses are next, and then the daffodils and the other narcissus are next, and then the hyacinths with all the beautiful. I mean, the seasons, they go round and round. The years go passing by, but it's if you're sitting with your face stuck in a phone, there's nothing wrong with that. I do all my business on my smartphone. I thank God for my Galaxy Note 9. I can deposit checks. I can do my banking. I do my emails. I can, register with I can check my social security. I can do all of that stuff. And I'm grateful that I don't have to go places and be on hold on the phone, on a landline, get disconnected and do all that stuff. But, when I'm done, I'm done. I want to spend time with my family and friends. And I'm about to have my 10th grandchild in 2 weeks in Utah. So,
oh wow! Congratulations!
I've got that'll be my sixth girl, and along with 4 boys. So I've got. I'm concerned about women's issues and women's place in the world. But my daughter and my granddaughters have definitely been taught that they can do all things through Christ who strengthens them. That there's nothing that they can't do if they put their minds to it, and it's something that's in the purview of what their Creator has for them. I don't want them to succeed if they want to make snuff films. I'm sorry, I just don't want them to succeed.
I hope he doesn't make snuff films.
Yes, and by the way, I am. Lord willing, and the creek don't rise, I am scheduled to be at Monster Bash in June in Mars, PA. I'll be a featured guest there. I will be having, if I still have some, I have about 12 pieces of the original blob still for sale in a vial. I still have some of those. I'm still working on some other things, but
wait a minute.
I think it'll be my. Say again.
You're selling pieces of the blob.
Yes, you can't buy the Mummy or Aquaman, but you can buy a bit old blob. Yes, you can.
Oh wow!
I'm going to have to do that. I'm going to have to invest.
With Providence. Well, you might want to contact me after we're done, because when they're gone, they're gone. And I'm so I'm starting to move them. If I have something, I mean, I sell them all the time. I just don't promote it that I do. I went up. They had a double feature at the Mahoning Drive-In of the Blob and the remake with Kevin Dillon, and I went up there, and I was one of the few gigs I had last year. I sold I sold several pieces to the Mahoning Drive-In. So if you want to, I highly recommend anybody who's within 2 hours of the Poconos to head over to that drive-in. They got a really great thing going on there.
Oh my God, yes. Joe Bob Briggs does his show from there sometimes.
It's phenomenal. It's a phenomenal place, and first I walked in there and I said, boy, there's some odd characters here, and then about 3 seconds later I thought, oh, this is a club for the people who have been, shut down by the rest of society. They're too odd for most other groups. But there's a camaraderie, there's a collegiality here, there's a respect. It's great, and I was just so happy to be there to participate. And there's a great documentary. I think it's on Netflix. It could be on Amazon. It's on one of the two about the Mahoning Drive-In. So I highly recommend that as well. But get out and go see a movie in a drive-in. I
got to watch you real quick before we go. I love seeing films at the Colonial Theater as well.
Well, I saw more
movies
there than any place. The close second for me was Radio City Music Hall, if you can believe that, because we were in New York so much to sing in sessions and whatnot. Every time we went, we'd see whatever was playing at Radio City. In a movie, my parents would drop us off there. My sister was 11, I was 10. We roamed Radio City. You could back in those days. And then afterwards, you saw a live show. Are you kidding me? Particularly the Christmas and the Easter shows. Wow.
How exciting.
And later in life, my wife actually worked for Atomic Design in Lidditz, who actually designed, they designed and built a stage show when the Rockettes went on tour for their Christmas show. So we actually got to see the stage show because we get comp for all the shows. And we saw the Eagles, U2. My wife had to repair Mick Jagger's 33-foot lips for the live stage show. So yeah, we continued until COVID killed the rock concert touring business. We were doing everything from Mark Anthony to Tina Turner, and she was doing and Bonnie Raitt. We did multiple times. Got to see Bonnie Raitt regularly. Joe Cocker, Steve Miller. The list just goes on and on and on because my wife got into rock and roll after working in musical theater at AMT in Lancaster, and I worked at Sighted and Sound, which is another big theater in Lancaster County, PA. And anyhow, yeah, show business is in the blood. It just I've been doing it all my whole life, and still do live performance, still do recording, still working on editing other projects.
Where can people find out where you're playing next if you have any gigs coming up?
Well, I'd say 99% of the time I play, it's a private gig and there's no public invited.
Okay.
But the next public place that I know that I can announce is, the end of June at Monster Bash.
The Monster Bash.
Yep. Which is the greatest group of my favorite horror convention. They don't do anything past they don't do any slasher movies. They don't do anything later than the 70s.
They really classic cinema.
Exactly. And they're just sweetheart people. The exhibitors, the volunteers, they're just the best people I've ever met anywhere at any of these things. So I'm happy to be there because I'll be 75 this year, and I think it's about time for to stop touring around from time to time. Although COVID made it really difficult and sort of made the decision up for me. They canceled. I had $35,000 worth of video business canceled in 2020 because of COVID. It was all booked. It was going to be my best video year in 10 years. And then COVID came to town. And the thing is, it was all about the 100th anniversary of women's suffrage. We've been working on this. We've been live streaming from the Constitution Center, from Drexel University, from Channel 12 in Philadelphia. Since we've been working on this since 2008. Finally, the big year coming, we're going to be doing all these events. Bam, COVID closed it down. So, and also it cost my wife her career in show business too. So, we've been adjusting, for the last 2 years, as has everybody else.
Yeah, my wife is an introvert, so she was relishing in the fact that she didn't have to make plans and could stay home and do her arts and crafts. It was lovely. Well, listen, Kris, I can't thank you enough.
I hope I gave you what you need.
It was just a pleasure to talk to you and hear your stories and hear you talk about your dad and your wonderful life.
Well, let's do it again, Jason. Okay. You
I
know,
would be honored.
now that we know a little bit more, let's talk. Let's talk a little bit on the phone. We'll drill down on a couple of specific things so we can get, instead of me just splitting all over the place, we can drill down on a particular subject. You know, whether it's the Blob, the 4D Man, the other things.
Are you
what would
be
like
at
to meet
Blobfest
Dick
this
Clark?
year?
Say again?
Are you going to be at Blobfest this year?
Look, last year, you know what the movies were in Blobfest last year? The Blob?
I was there. There was no Blobfest. Yeah.
Well, no, it was virtual for the second year in a row.
Oh, that's right.
So they showed The Blob, 4D Man, Dinosaurs, all films that my father had produced and directed. Jack executive produced them, but my dad was actually co-producer and listed also as producer on Dinosaurs. Of course, my mother wrote the script for Dinosaurs. Is the one who put all the humor in it. My mother put all the humor in it, and the other guy who wrote it complained to the Writers Guild that her name shouldn't be on it, and they reviewed the whole thing. They said, not only should her name be on it, her name should be first, and you're lucky your name's on it at all. So that's what he got for complaining. But technically, in reality, my father started at the back and my mother started at the front, rewriting the script, and they met in the middle. And my mother put all the humor in that so many people hate about that. And because, the dinosaur, the caveman dealing with 20th century technology, which, of course, in 1960 meant waxed fruit and a flush toilet and a woman wearing a night mask that scared the snot out of them, and a drunken Irish night watchman. But there's a lot of humor all the way in there. My mother put it in there. And by the way, on the kind of Lorber 4K retransfer of 4D Man and Dinosaurus, I do the commentary.
So I'm going to have to check it out.
Definitely, the 4D Man is more worth it because I also gave them over 100 production stills from the 4D Man. So I'd highly recommend you get the Kino Lorber. A lot of times it's on sale on Amazon, but it's so funny to my grandkids. Hey, look, Grandfather's on Amazon. So
that's great.
I guess
Dinosaurs. I'm going to have to check it. I can't believe I've never seen it. I love these movies. I've never seen it.
Well, Dinosaurus was actually shot in true CinemaScope. It's 2:35 to 1 aspect ratio. The 4K transfer is phenomenal. It is, and my father's in it in the background, and I didn't even know until I watched the film many times, but because I had to look at it to think about commentary, I realized my father's in a scene there where he's sitting. They use it for rear screen projection. They use rear screen. They use matte. They use miniature. They use all kinds of stuff all the way through the film. And I didn't do as good a job on 4D Man. On Dinosaurus because I only went to the set a couple of days. I was going to school and they moved us to California for that year. Whereas 4D Man was made in the summer of 1958. I was there all the time, so I had relationships with everybody on the film, and I could tell stories about everybody, which I do, by the way, on the 4D Man. I don't have those stories to tell about Dinosaurus because it wasn't shot at our place like the Blob was in the 4D Man were. But I highly recommend the Kino Lorber 4K transfer of 4D Man for my commentary. I recommend you get Dinosaurus because it's spectacular. My commentary could have been better, but yes, you should check those out.
All right, you got it. I'm on it. And next time we chat, I'll have a full review.
Okay, doke. Sounds great. Hey,
Kris,
listen, thank you
again.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you, Kris. It was great talking to you.
Yes, and let's try and do this one more time before the sun sets beyond the horizon.
I would love to, and we'll, before Monster Bash, we'll get together again.
Sounds like a plan. I have a couple other things in the
Thank you.
work here that I may be interested in discussing with you before then too, because I've got some other things happening with some other restoration projects of some of my father's other films. So it's looking kind of interesting right now.
That is wonderful. That's so cool.
Hey, thanks a bunch, everybody. If I don't see you sooner, I'll see you later.
Love it. Thank you very much.
Thanks again, Kris. Have a good night.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Bobby. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And this has been Hi, I'm Jason, the audio version. And you all take care of yourself and stay home safe. Bye.
Bye.